Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the ZoobTube. This time we'll be taking a look at how to create the Marvel production logo. So let's take a look at what we'll be creating today. All right, so that's what we're going to be creating today. There's a few steps involved, so I'm going to break this up into a few different parts. This is part one, and in this one, we're going to be setting up the logo in Adobe Illustrator. I guess let's jump right in. So this is a screenshot that I took from a YouTube video of the Marvel logo, and I'm just going to trace over this. So let's go ahead and lock our layer, add a new layer, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle over here, and white is fine, and then I'm going to drop the opacity down. That way I can see my lines when I'm drawing and still have enough separation from the background. So I'm going to lock that as well. And then create another layer, and let's zoom in here and start making the lines. I'm going to go with the pen tool. If you guys don't use the pen tool, I highly recommend it. It's one of the greatest tools in graphic designer's arsenal. But let's just drop in a few guides over here. Now you can forward through this part if you already know how to use Illustrator and if you're good at it. But this is kind of for people that maybe don't know how to use Illustrator that well and can follow along. So I'm just gonna go outline this logo. Now, see, the problem over here is this is getting rid of what you want to see behind it. So I'm just going to change the fill color to none. That's a little bit more visible. So I double click on the layer to bring up the layer options, and I'm going to change the color to blue is probably fine. Yeah, that looks up pretty good. Shows up pretty good. So go back to the pen tool and keep making those lines. You can hold down Shift to constrain to straight lines. One more thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to line up these points. So I select them with my direct selection tool over here. And then I'm going to come to my align panel and just do a vertical align over here. That way those points line up and we're not getting weird type stuff. Okay, let's move on to the A. And again, like I said, you can forward through this if you want to. I've already done this once before, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again anyway. And then we need to knock out that center shape of the A. So let's do that. Select all 3 points and let's see. Go to our align and distribute it. Horizontal distribute. And that'll give us a perfect triangle. What we're going to do is we're going to use Pathfinder to cut that shape out. So let's go to Pathfinder and use the second one, minus front. And then now that's made it a single shape. Let's just give it a fill color over here. See what that looks like. That looks pretty good. Now, you notice I am making each individual letter separately, and that's kind of what you want to do because we want to animate that separately. You don't want this to be one single path. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Splitting it up right here. And overlapping is fine. That's kind of what we want in our final render. So just kind of be mindful, when you're making something, to look at the source material, kind of see what they're doing and go from there. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to come out to here and then go over here. I'm going to go pull a guide just to kind of come about halfway. Go back to my pen tool, hit my anchor point, and then come out here. And that's kind of where I think the R ends. So I'm going to click and then hold down Shift and drag. And that'll pull out this straight kind of line. And that's what I want. And I'll tweak it later, but this is a good start. So I'm going to do that and then that. Now, we close our path, but it's obviously not right. So if you hold down Alt or Option on a Mac, you can click and then hold down Shift to constrain this to 90 and then just drag it till it's right. And we're going to do the same thing over here. That looks about right. Let's keep going. Then we're going to do the same thing with Pathfinder over here. Go back to our pen tool. Now, there is a kind of an easy way to do simple letters like E and L. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to drag out a rectangle that covers the whole E. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to get my rectangle tool again and then do this shape like that. And then use my selection tool, hold down Alt, and then hold down Shift to constrain. And that'll copy my shape. So now, you want to select all three and then hit that, and boom, there's your E. I'm going to give these all a fill color. That way we can see them a little bit better. So I'm going to do the L the same way that I did my E. I'm going to go fill color, set to none. Go back to my rectangle tool and deselect that rectangle. Go back to my rectangle tool, come up here, make the second rectangle. Just going to pull this out a little bit. And then select both of them and do your minus front again. Okay, now one easy way to do a fill color on any shape is to select it, and then you can hold down I, and that brings up this eyedropper tool, and you can select any color to make that the fill color, or actually it's going to be whatever's selected. So if I had the strokes color selected, it would do the stroke. But anyway, so we got our letters here. I'm just going to make a couple of quick edits. I don't really like the way that looks, so okay, that's probably good. The next thing we want to do is put a rectangle around this border. Now, let's flip our fill and stroke color. And then go to our stroke panel here and do align inside stroke. We're going to be using this stroke to animate a border around in Cinema 4D, and we'll get to that later. But you can just leave that the way it is. And then what we're going to do next is do select all or Control or Command A. And then copy. I'm just going to go and make a new file over here. 1920 by 1080, 72 ppi is fine. I'm going to call this Marvel Logo Tutorial. We're just going to set up this in Adobe Illustrator in part 1 and then bring it into Cinema 4D, and we'll go over some problems that might cause. So open a new file and then select all, Control A, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste. And so that brought our logo into a new file, and you can scale this up, down, whatever. But what we need to do now is make this so that we can export it into Cinema 4D. So I'm going to go to File and Save As, and that's fine. We're going to hit Save, and then this Illustrator option box pops up. Now, if you save it as Illustrator CC or CS6 or CS5, what have you, you will not be able to open it in Cinema 4D natively unless you have some sort of plugin. Now, to be able to do this, you have to save it as an Illustrator 8 file. So let's go ahead and save it as an Illustrator 8 file. I'm going to hit OK. And you might get an error that says old legacy format, blah, blah, blah. You can just go ahead and ignore that, hit OK. I have mine turned off. Now let's jump into Cinema 4D and create a new file. And let's go to File and Merge and import that that path that we just made. So this is here's our file. I'm going to click Open and scale this to 10. And I'm going to leave these off and let's see what that does. Let's hit OK. Now what that did is it brought in as separate paths, and you can see kind of it's hanging out over there. And it's not in the center of the field. To fix that, what we can do is reset the position, scale, and rotation. And to do that quickly, we can do Shift-C to bring up the command box, and then type in PSR, and hit Reset PSR, double-click Reset PSR, and that'll bring our line art into the middle. That's perfect. Okay, what we want to do next is we want to name these. So let's go ahead and look at what everything is. Path 8 is L, so I'm going to call that L. Now, group 2 is R, and that's because it has a outside stroke and inside shape. Now, we don't really want it to stay that way. What we can do to make one path instead of two is select both of those paths, right-click, and then go down to Connect Objects plus Delete. And what this does it'll make one object from the two splines, and it'll delete the other two objects. So I'm going to hit that, and that made my R a single path. So I'm going to rename that R, and we can take it out of the group and then delete that null, and that's a M. And then we're going to do the same thing with A. Marvel logo here, and our border. Now we'll get to the border in a minute. For now, I'm just going to turn it off. You can turn it off over here in Cinema 4D by holding down Alt and clicking twice. And what that'll do is it'll just turn it off. It won't render. and it won't preview on your screen. So you will not be able to see it. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to extrude these letters out to make them 3D. So for that, you want to go into this menu over here and select extrude. Alternatively, you can hit Shift-C and type in extrude, and it'll do the same thing. And to get rid of this box, you want to hit escape, and that'll just get rid of it. What we could do is we could just drop this whole null in the extrude object over here and then click hierarchical, and that'll kind of give us what we want. But we want to be able to animate each letter separately, so we're not going to do that. We're going to make an extrude object for each letter over here. So what I'm going to do is drop this into the Marvel logo and then drop the M spline into the extrude object. And I'm going to rename this to M. And let's just work on a single letter, and then later what we can do is copy it over to the other spline. So let's work on this. Go into your object tab, and right now what it's doing is you want to increase your Z-axis to give it some depth. So I'm going to go to, let's see. We also want to give it some caps, and what that'll do is have it catch the light a little bit better. So we'll go into the caps tab over here and go into our starting cap and set that to fillet cap. And you see right there, that little kind of shine that shows up on the letter. That's kind of what we want. But let's change the settings a little bit. Steps 1 is fine. We don't want any more than 1 because that's going to start rounding it out. But we do want to increase the radius a little bit. To see that a little bit better. So I'm going to go to like 20, 25 looks pretty good. The next thing that you want to do with the extrude object is, so what constrain does is it constrains the shape to the original spline. And that's what we want. Okay, next thing we want to do is copy. We need, let's see, 5 more. So what we're going to do is just Control C and then Control V 5 times. 5. I'm just gonna rename this A. Okay, now I'm just gonna select these by control clicking to select multiple, and then hit delete to get rid of all of them. And then what I'm gonna do next is drop these splines into the respective extrude objects. Boom. And then you can minimize these, select all of them. You can do that by clicking the first one, holding down Shift, and then clicking the last one, and then click and drag. And we just want to drop it right under this M here, but not inside the M. So let's undo that. Drop this down and then drag it. Okay, now we've got our letters. And this is what they look like. Let's do some camera and scene setup, and then we'll call it for part 1, and we'll pick it up in part 2. So what you want to do is add a plane. You can do that by going over here and click on plane. You want to orient it the correct way, so let's go into orientation and find which orientation. Z plus is what we need, and then go into our scale tool and scale it way up, way up. And then move it back in Z space. Let's shoot that. Let's come down to about the end there. That looks great. One more thing that you might want to do is set up your file a little bit better. So let's go to edit render settings and go into standard render is fine for now. Let's go into output and change the aspect ratio to Panavision. And that's what we want, because that's how the Marvel logo shows up at the beginning of a movie in Panavision. So that's what we want. So set it to Panavision and then change this. Let's hit lock ratio and then change this to 1080. We want 1920 over here for the resolution to be 1080p or equivalent to 1080p. One more thing that I want to do before we call this is add a light, and we'll do an initial render and see what it looks like. Right now it's just the Cinema 4D default light, and it does not look very good. If we hit render, it just has this kind of flat. There's no shadows, no nothing. So we'll just go over here. We'll add an area light, and let me move back out here a little bit so I can see. Let's move our light out and up and to the left a little bit. The other thing you want to do is kind of scale that area up a little bit. And what that'll do is just make the shadows a little bit softer. Basically act like a softbox. So let's render that. See what that looks like. It looks about the same because we didn't add any shadows or anything. So let's go into our shadow type and select shadow maps. Or I'm sorry, let's select area because it renders a little bit faster than shadow maps. And then hit render. Okay, that is looking all right. Not exactly where we want to be. One more thing we can do here is set our anti-aliasing to best. I'll give us a little bit better preview. There we go. I'm just going to bring this light a little bit closer, make it a little bit bigger. And then we can crank up the intensity a little bit and see what that does. That concludes part 1 of this tutorial. In part 2, we'll be taking a look at how to create the comic book flip sequence in After Effects and bring it into Cinema 4D. And then take a look at how to apply it as a material in Cinema 4D and get that cool flip animation. Please hit that like button if you liked the video and subscribe to get more videos like this. See you guys later.